Do you guys remember what kind of organism this is? What does it look like?
A shell.
It's a shell, yeah. So it's an organism that has to make a shell. It's actually a pteropod, and they make their shells out of aragonite. If you remember, there's two forms of calcium carbonate, aragonite and calcite, which is the most stable form in today's seawater. Calcite, right. So they're unfortunately really feeling the effects of ocean acidification soonest. Because you can see, this is from an experiment where they really lowered the pH, but they actually start to dissolve. So, two things happen when you put CO2 into water. You lower the pH, which means that you raise the acidity, and you lower the concentration of carbonate ion. And we just kind of saw why that was. So I said it's already decreased by 0.1 pH units, and it's going to potentially decrease another 0.3 or 0.4 by the end of the century. So that might not seem like a big deal to you. It seems tiny, but we talked about pH is actually logarithmic scale, right? So if you calculate if you put in pH 8.2 and pH 8.1 and calculate the hydrogen ion concentration for each, it's actually, that change is like 30% change in hydrogen ion concentration. So 0.3 to 0.4 would be a lot. And a lot of people are, rightfully so maybe, skeptical that this is, really a bad thing. But in addition to it being a relatively large change in hydrogen ion concentration, if you look at past climate changes, it's similar to CO2 in that the problem is not necessarily the drop in pH per se, it's that it's dropping really quickly. And that doesn't give organisms, it doesn't give us very much time to adapt to the changes. Okay. So I want to talk about why does this matter in terms of biology. The first is that calcification is obviously going to be more difficult at a lower pH. So we talked about why this is. If you have a lower pH, you have more hydrogen ions, which is basically going to just suck up all of the carbonate. So there's going to be much less for the calcifying organisms to use to make calcium carbonate. In addition, though, to calcification being more difficult, it also apparently affects chemical and enzymatic processes. And I have this picture of blood up here because I was wondering if any of you know what the pH of human blood is. If you didn't guess.
Isn't it 7? Aren't we at?
It's a little bit higher. It's like 7.3 to 7.45 ish. So it's less than seawater. But what if that's a pH, what if you dropped it to 7? Do you think that would be okay, or what do you think would happen?
Proteins might have problems.
Yeah, your enzymes might have issues doing what they normally do. Actually, you can die, or you can have seizures, you can go into a coma. It's that bad, just from like a little 0.2 to 0.3 change in pH. So it's the same for marine organisms. All these things, negative neurological effects, reproductive effects, and even the organisms that can adapt to this, they have to use up energy. So stages like larval stages or baby fish that have sort of limited amount of energy supply, this is probably going to affect them the most. So early developmental stages of organisms. Okay, and this is a question that I got, and I think it's a legitimate question because why should we spend money, resources, time on studying ocean acidification? Why should we worry about changing it when maybe we have bigger problems? And if it's just the pteropods can't make their shells anymore, like, oh, that's sad, but like, who really cares? But you should care because Turns out it's not just them. So I put one organism up there that's going to be affected, crustaceans. Can anyone name something else that you think? I'm going to write them over here. I'm going to see how many you guys can get.
Whales.
Whales. Why would whales be affected?
Because if they eat like things that make shells, like microscopic things in water that make shells, they're going to run out of food.
Right. Or what if they eat fish that eat things that make shells? Like, there's all these potential food web effects, right? Good one. What else? Coral, yeah, coral is an obvious one. Because do they use calcite or aragonite, you know? Aragonite, right. So things are already not super great for the corals, and now it's going to be worse. So corals are sort of a double whammy though, because they can't calcify under these conditions, and also they lose their symbiotic algae because the water's too warm. In the interest of time, so you got the first one. And we've talked about all of these guys. Also, there's bivalves, so all these things that I really like to eat: oysters, mussels, clams. Some of them are calcite. Some of them are a combination of aragonite and calcite. Some of them use aragonite only when they're small, so you can see how that would be a problem, because they would die before they ever got to be adults. Crustaceans, the picture was up there already, but it turns out this is why we need to do research, because some of them actually make stronger shells. So you don't know why, or is that going to be helpful, or is that going to, in the long run, cost too much energy? Not sure. But there's also sea urchins, starfish, which you might not have even realized made calcite skeletons. And then there's things like fish, not just because of what they eat, but because of the actual pH changes. So there's studies with clownfish that show that under lower pH, they actually have trouble navigating. They don't flee threatening noises that would indicate a predator. So maybe some neurological effects. And that's sad because Nemo will never find his way home, guys. He'll be swimming around forever. And then if you like to eat salmon, I have to mention them. Guess what salmon eat? And mostly juvenile salmon. Something we never think about. I didn't think about it either. They eat pteropods. So those poor little guys that are so sad, who cares? Salmon, it's like their major source of food. And even if you don't care about biological diversity, or you think corals are dumb, there's a lot of economic impacts. So you can see that this is just industry. $4 billion a year. And that's just from 2007. So I'm sure it's grown by now. And just an example of, again, why this is important, not just for ocean health, but also for our food supply and for our economic health. You guys are on the east. Is anyone from Washington?
Born in Seattle.
Oh, so you probably know this whole story. This was a big deal. But basically all the oyster larvae at these farms started dying, so they weren't being recruited to solid substrates. And when they investigated it, they actually found that it was linked to upwelling events. So I should explain that these farms are like right on the coast, and they're like in big enclosures that are exposed to incoming and outgoing tide because they need the water changes to thrive. But during these upwelling events, which are highlighted in orange, you had also high mortality of the oyster larvae. And it turns out that oyster larvae make their first shells in like 4 hours out of aragonite. And so at these very slight changes, they but why, you guys should know this, why would upwelling bring more acidic water to the coast?
Because it's from the deep ocean?
It's like old water being brought, especially in the Pacific, right? The Pacific has the most acidic deep water. So when upwelling was particularly strong and it was coming from deeper in the water column, you were getting enough of an acidity change to kill these oyster larvae. So this started off depressing, but this is actually like a climate success story. And so now this is from 2015. They've done all these studies, figured out what the problem was, and now they actually monitor the acidity of the water, and more importantly, they monitor the carbonate ion concentration, and they installed buffer systems. So now when they detect that the carbonate concentration is getting too low, they can add carbonate to the system to bring the acidity levels back to normal. This might be a sort of a temporary fix, because if it keeps getting worse, it might end up being really hard to keep doing this. And it's not just oysters, right? It's like, if you think about Maine's lobster industry is like a couple $billion a year, just lobster. So it's really important to keep doing research like this to sort of try to mitigate any effects that might occur.